Hi everybody, it's Rhiannon from the Epsom Bakehouse, and I wanted to talk to you today about three secrets to getting tastier bread without taking up lots of your time. And I started thinking about this topic because it's actually the world famous Epsom Derby horse race here in Epsom this weekend. And on a very tenuous link, I thought I would make it that when you're watching the horse racing, of course, you want to be backing the horse that is first past the post, the quickest horse in that race. And I wanted to start thinking about that in terms of bread baking, and actually it's the exact opposite. If you are baking bread and you want to get tastier bread, because you want to be backing a slow bread and actually taking up lots of your time when you are baking bread. And that is one of the key secrets to getting tastier bread, is to leave time when you are making your dough. And the first thing I would say is I made this dough actually on Monday, and you can see that it's well risen in the bowl. And I had a demonstrations at a local country fair on Monday, and I made this dough, and actually it's still fermenting now, and that gives me lots of flavour in my dough. So why do you want to back a slow bread? Well, you need to leave your dough to rise when it is you've mixed in the yeast, and that gives your dough time to ferment. And during that process, the yeast are breaking down the starch in the dough and releasing sugars that they then feed on to produce gas. And actually the gas production will happen pretty quickly to rise your dough. But if you can leave a lot more time to rise your dough, the yeast will have more time to break down the starches and produce those sugars that the yeast feed on, but also which add flavour to your dough, bring a sweetness, because at the beginning it is just a raw lump basically of flour and water which has limited taste. You need to give the yeast time to break it down and produce those compounds, those sugar compounds that add taste. Otherwise it's a bit like trying to eat an egg without first cracking it open and cooking it. It really won't taste that great, and I don't recommend you doing it. But once you've given it time to be cracked open and to cook, you bring in a lot of flavour to that egg that you will enjoy eating. And it's the same with letting your dough ferment. You'll make those sugars, and the yeast will break down the starch to make sugars. And when you then interrupt that process by baking your loaf of bread, you will you'll find that the sugars caramelise as well to give that beautiful crust. So that is the first secret to baking a tastier bread, is to leave a lot of time for your bread to rise, for your dough to rise. So second secret on that is that I did say without taking up lots of your time. You're thinking, well, I don't want to sit around and wait for my dough to rise. And actually, you say you made that on Monday, Rhiannon? Well, I did make this on Monday, and I'm recording this on Thursday evening. That this dough has risen, but it's very slow. And that's because I use the fridge, and that's one way of getting your bread dough to rise slowly, but also to give all that time for the flavour to develop. And if you put it in the fridge, your dough will just rise very, very slowly and slow down the action of the yeast. So that gives the time for the dough to develop and develop all those lovely flavours. And a third way that you can do that is introduce a pre-ferment into your dough making. And that is simply taking some of the flour, water and yeast or any liquid from the recipe and mixing it up the day before you want to bake. So all of that process, all of that time that the yeast is given overnight before you add in the rest of the ingredients to your dough, it will take breaking down the flour, the starch in the flour, to create all those beautiful flavours from the sugars. So that was just a really quick tip. I just thought I wanted to show you that I had made this dough on Monday, and in actual fact these are some rolls I baked from it just now. So they're probably not the prettiest rolls I'm ever going to make, but they certainly do smell amazing. They've cooled down now, so I'm going to split one open to make into a sandwich. And but they do smell amazing. They're going to have a fantastic taste, and you've really brought out all of that taste in the dough. In terms of time, I'm not suggesting that you do need to leave your dough in the fridge for 4 days, but overnight or even up to 24 hours would be a really great way of getting some more flavour into your dough. So those were 3 quick tips to getting tastier bread without taking up too much of your time. So leaving your dough to ferment for as long as possible. Obviously you don't need to be there while that process is going on, so you can leave it to rise. You can use the fridge as an extended period of dough rising, so it will just slow down the action of the yeast. Or you can do what we call a pre-ferment. So mix up some of the flour and water and yeast from your recipe and leave it to sit overnight before you make up the rest of your dough the next day. I hope that's been really helpful, and if you're watching, do let me know in the comments if you're making bread and you've got any questions that you'd like answered. And if you're enjoying these kind of bread making tips that I do share regularly on my account in my Facebook Lives, then you might want to join me for a longer free training session that I'm doing next Tuesday evening at 8:30. It'll be a live online training session, and we'll be talking about the 3 secrets you need to know to start baking great bread in your own home kitchen. So it's really great if you've been considering baking bread, or you're just getting started baking bread, or perhaps you just want to see how your bread baking compares and how you're doing if you've just started baking bread and you want to tweak the recipes and techniques that you're using. I'll be doing this live online training next Tuesday evening, and if you want to come along, you can register for that. So if you go to my website, which is www.theepsonbakehouse.co.uk/free training, then that is where you can register for this live training that I'll be doing next Tuesday evening. That's the 4th of June if you're watching a bit later. And there'll be plenty of time then for some Q&As in your questions. But as I say, we'll be talking about 3 key secrets to knowing if you're baking great bread at home. So as I said, if you'd like to register, I'll pop the link in the comments. Do let me know if you've got any questions there as well about anything I mentioned today. But otherwise, you can go to my website, www.theepsonbakehouse.co.uk/free training, and you'll find out more details of the free training I'm doing there, what we'll be covering, and you'll find a link if you want to sign up. Just pop your email in, and we'll get some details sent out to you before that about how you can join the free training. But otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this tip today. The video will be available on replay. Do let me know in the comments if you've got any other questions. I apologise again for making a very tenuous link to the derby that's happening here in Epsom this weekend, but if you are watching or you're in and around the Epsom area, do enjoy, and I'll be watching too. And otherwise, I will say bye for now, and do join me again soon for more bread making tips to help you bake great bread at home.